Hey friend, today I have some thrift store makeovers that I know that you're going to love. Let's get started. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Cindy and I'm with Reinvented Delaware. If you've been here for a while, thanks so much for coming back. Today we're going to make over several things that I found while out thrifting over the last couple of weeks. I have a quilt to share with you. You see it in the background and you're thinking, quilt, how in the world do you repurpose a quilt? I'll show you. I have some ironstone that I'm going to clean up. And speaking of cleaning, I have a vintage blue bottle that I got so cheap. I can't wait to tell you about that. I found another basket. We're going to clean that up as well. We have a few other projects and then I have a bonus project at the end. We're going to repurpose some cloth napkins into the cutest little pumpkins you've ever seen. Let's get started. I love to find baskets when I'm out thrifting. They are great for storage and organization, but they're almost always really dirty and gross. So I like to bleach them. I just pour some bleach in a little container. Then I get a disposable chip brush and I saturate this thing inside and out. You'll see I'm outside in my workshop, so I have plenty of ventilation. I probably should have worn some gloves, but I was really careful not to get my hand in the bleach. I just got it on the chip brush. I gave it a good coat thoroughly all over. I allowed it to dry outside and then I put a second coat on it and allowed that to dry as well. Watch the whole video because I have a bonus project just for you. Let's get started on this quilt. Now there is a lot of damage on this quilt. It is very well loved. In fact, you can see right there where someone already repaired it, and areas like that were all over this quilt. I found lots of areas. So what you see here is I'm doing a ladder stitch. You take a little stitch on either side of the area that needs to be repaired, and you just, you see there what I'm doing. You just put a little stitch on either side. And then at the end, you pull it and you gather, and that will kind of cinch up that area and protect it. It does make a little gathering on the back side of the quilt, but I'm okay with that. You can see another little repair there from the first owner. I came across these adorable gardening tools, and I can't believe that I've never bought a gardening rake like you see here, this little hand rake. I've seen them lots, and I just have never picked one up. I don't know, probably because of the price. I'm like the queen of cheap. Anyway, it's past the season to use gardening tools, but I want to take care of these. So I gave them a nice little sand to get rid of some of that loose rust. And then I'm taking Dixie Belle's Big Mama's Butta. This is a wonderful natural oil paste that you can apply on chalk paint to seal it, but it also works really well to protect the metal and the wood on gardening tools. So I went ahead and coated all the surfaces with this protective oil, and then I'll just allow them to dry and they'll be ready to use next spring. By the way, using oils on metal gardening tools is nothing new. My first time that I ever heard this was from Martha Stewart, probably about 30 years ago. Okay, so I took a little break from the repairs and then I came back to it. And honestly, I had to do this several times over a period of a few days during the day, during the night. And I worked on this quilt during the hurricane, the tropical storm that came through called Idalia, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Let me know. I don't know if you had any damage from that storm. Fortunately, we didn't, but it did afford me a lot of time to work on the repairs of this quilt. Now you'll see here, I'm just hand tacking down that seam that had come loose. It had just unraveled, that's all. And I'm kind of doing it in a similar way, the way the previous owner repaired this quilt. I just kind of thought that was a good idea to kind of go along with the same way that it had been repaired before. You see also that I tucked under that raw edge as much as I could and then pulled it in so that it would have a protected edge inside, kind of like a little hem. And I did pull the stitches kind of tight. And I'm using a really sharp needle and I'm using 100% cotton thread that I have used for years. It's called Gutermann. I've used this brand of thread for years. I'm going to try to link the supplies that I've used for these repairs in this quilt and for the other projects down in the description, so be sure to check that. As I finished one area that needed repair, I just searched and found another area, and I just kept moving all the way around the whole quilt until I got most of the repairs done. Now, I will have to work on some other areas as time permits, but for now, I really did get most of the repairs are finished, and I just wanted to show you a sampling of the different styles of repairs that I did. If you have any questions about this kind of sewing, please feel free to ask down in the comments, and I'll help you the best I can. Several of the sections were pretty ratty. You see that there, it's pretty torn. It was too much to darn. So what I did on several of these was I just made like a patch. You see it here. And this is some fabric that I had on hand from other quilt projects that I've worked on. And I just cut a square. I turned under the edges. And this is basically a hand applique stitch. You can barely even see it. And I had to do that quite a bit on this quilt. I've mentioned this before on my videos as well as on our podcast, but I'm a project jumper. How about you? Do you like to go from one project to the next? That is really the way that I work. It is just the way that my mind is. I got tired of sewing, so I moved on to the next thing, which was cleaning some of these gorgeous ironstone pieces and that blue bottle that I got for only 75 cents. I could hardly believe it. I'm going to link the video of the place where we went shopping. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but I'll link it down below. It was one of our recent shopping trips. I'm using Earth Brite to clean a lot of these items. Earth Brite is great on metals, but it's also wonderful on glass and on ironstone. You can really clean a piece and polish it up so nicely, and it's safe to use. It's safe on your hands. I really do enjoy this product, and I use it a lot. You'll see in a little bit that I have a lot of these measuring cups with that embossed. The measurements are like embossed. They're not the red ink that we're used to seeing on some of the more modern measuring cups. And I have a ton of these, not a ton, but you know what I'm saying. I have a lot of them. I love the look of them. I also have stacks of butter pats. Now this little stack of butter pats I paid $10 for. There are 5 of them, I think, so that's $2 a piece. I couldn't believe it. And oval bowls are one of my most favorite things. All of our plates and all of our bowls, well, most of our bowls are oval. And we use these ironstone dishes, by the way, every single day. When I was finished with all of the washing, I rinsed them really, really well under super hot water, and I used that same yellow scrubber just to make sure I got all the residue of the cleaner off, and then I set them out to dry. I found this little hand beater and it was in such good shape I grabbed it. It was only a few dollars, I don't remember exactly, under 10. But it didn't have a lot of rust. A lot of these that I've seen have been so rusted there's just no way I'm going to get it clean. It was missing the red decorative handle. You can see there that it's obvious that there was a red section there where you would hold your hand. That part was missing. I'm okay with that. I took this really small brush that I use a lot. The one end has really long bristles and it can kind of reach down in. And I used the same Earth Brite cleaner and I went around this whole thing and gave it a really good clean. Now, by the way, I plan on using this. That's why I wanted one that wasn't rusted. All it needed was a good cleaning. While all those pieces dry, it's time to hang these little whisk brooms. Now, maybe I didn't mention, but I've been collecting little whisk brooms. I found 2 of them just recently. They're so cute, and they're going to hang in my laundry room right beside our pantry door. I'm using command strips. I know there probably is something cuter to use than these little command strips, but until I find something cuter, I'm just going to use these. Now you have to put that sticky part on it on the back first, and then you put it up on the wall, and it has to sit for a couple of hours before you actually hang the thing. I think it just helps with the bonding. So I figured out where I wanted them. Sorry I didn't show you. I didn't have my camera angled correctly. And anyway, I figured out where the hooks needed to go. I stuck them on, and then I just set the whisk brooms there until a few hours passed, and I knew that the hooks were on the wall securely. Repairs on the quilt. Now the only way I'm getting this done is this thing right here. This is one of these floor standing magnifying lights, and yes, I am of that age that I need a magnifier and a light, and it makes small handwork just like this a breeze. I could not see without it. I'll show you in a little bit what it looks like under the magnifying glass. For the sake of the camera, I was just trying to show you here. But you can see how some of these fabrics are just thinner than the other fabrics, and you can tell they were really worn. So here's another patch that I'm going to put on over top. These are all leftover fabrics that I've had from previous quilts that I've made in the past. All I did was cut a square to fit over top of that area, and I kind of tucked everything in, and I gave myself a seam allowance when I cut. And then I just stitched it all the way around just with a little hand stitch to get a little whip stitch all the way around just to applique it down. Let's chat a little bit about my history with quilting. So I got my first sewing lesson by one of my sisters when I was 9 years old. She was in high school and taking sewing classes back in the day when sewing classes were offered in high school. She convinced me that ripping out the seams was an honor. And being the 9-year-old that I was, I fell for it and I ripped out her seams, all of her mishaps. Anyway, it was not a big deal. And you know, even now, I don't mind ripping out seams when I sew. But that was my first experience with sewing. And then I just got into sewing a lot. In high school, I took 4 years of sewing. I loved my sewing classes. I got permission to spend all my study halls in sewing. I just loved it so much. And then when I got into my 20s and I started having babies, I sewed so much with clothing, quilts, everything you can imagine. I just was sewing home decor before it was popular to sew home decor, and just everything, pillows, curtains, you name it, I was making it. Then I developed a love for quilting somewhere in there, and I just made so many quilts. It was such a fun way to watch a movie and be productive at the same time. And then if you remember, I also took care of an elderly lady for years, and she would get her hair done, and I just had to wait. So I had about 2 hours of waiting for her. I always had some kind of project, mostly a quilt, working in my hands while I was waiting for her at the hairdresser. It is just a love of mine. If you are into quilting, let me know down in the comments. I want to know if you love to quilt or if you love quilts. Close-up of this magnifying glass. I have the light turned off because of the camera. It wouldn't pick it up, but you can just see your object that you're working on so closely. Okay, let's work on these stains. So I grabbed a bar of Fels naphtha, a microfiber cloth, and some vinegar. I filled up a little tub with some water, and then I saturated with water the areas that needed the help. And I used my microfiber cloth to kind of get the water over there. I sudsed it up with the Fels naphtha, and I just really worked the soap into those stains. They look pretty bad when they're wet. They don't look as bad when they're dry. Now, Fels naphtha is an old-fashioned soap, and it works really well on stains. I've used it on a lot of stains, and it's gentle on your fabric, but effective. I'll say that. Now, I did run into a little bit of an issue. You'll see later in the video the issue that I ran into. But I was able to get a lot of these stains out. It took some effort The microfiber cloth, I feel like that really helped. Microfiber, I know it's a controversial fabric right now. I don't think it will, I'm not sure what the controversy is, but if you know, let me know down in the comments. But one thing I do know is that if you use a microfiber cloth with just water, it will pick up a stain. Like on a carpet, if you have a carpet stain, you can use a microfiber cloth and just water to remove that stain. It's really amazing. So that's why I'm using that cloth on this stain. Now you see I was taking a little bit of the color off, a little bit of the dye off of that fabric with the microfiber cloth. So I tried to be careful. I did get a lot of soap in there and I really worked it into the fibers. For the most part, that's what I'm doing. I'm working the soap into the fibers and I'm just going to let it sit for maybe an hour or so and let it really soak in and soften up that stain. While those stains are soaking with the fell's naphtha worked into it, let's go ahead and put some of this ironstone away. So here in my kitchen, I have this open shelving unit and a lot of my ironstone pieces are there. We literally use these pieces every single day. There's my pretty little stack of some of my oval bowls. They're my favorite. My husband and I like to have yogurt and berries every night and we use those bowls. There's my newest stack of Ironstone butter pats. That just makes my heart happy right there with that stamp underneath. I have a lot of butter pats. It's a little bit of a problem, but that's a good problem to have. And then I have this pretty little pitcher. Let's wait and see where I put this. Back to this stain. Let's go see what's going on. Uh-oh, do you see what's happening? The fell's naphtha is actually lightening that fabric. See that purple fabric? And where I rubbed it in, it's actually lightening that. So there's my little mishap. In the meantime, I was cooking bacon. I know I have a lot of stuff going on. And I decided it was time to put this adorable little measuring cup away with all my other measuring cups. It is a problem, but they're so cute. I can't help it. Now this blender thing, this hand mixer, I've got to decide where to keep it because this is the area in my kitchen where I will use it. I think I eventually want to hang it up. I don't know. You let me know, where should I put that hand blender? Should I leave it out? Should I put it in the cabinet? You just let me know down in the comments. So for that little blue bottle, I just thought it would be pretty to take some of my zinnias, which are just about done. It's the end of the season. But I thought it would be pretty to take the zinnias and just make a pretty little natural element or natural floral arrangement. I also have some allium in there, those big purple balls of just blooms. They're so pretty. Yeah, and that's it. By the way, did you notice the curlers in my hair? That's so funny. All right, it was safe to hang up those two whisk brooms on those hooks, those command hooks, so I went ahead and hung them on the left side of our pantry. Then over on the right side, I hung up this old-fashioned broom. Now the broom itself is new. I'm going to link the video where I bought this broom. You won't believe what I paid for this handmade broom. Corn, I can't bring it to my mind what that's called. It's an old-fashioned broom corn. Is that what it's called? I think that's what it's called. Anyway, I hung it up on an old-fashioned hook that my husband found recently, and Oh, I just love the look of this, and I'm going to use this broom. I like to use the things that I find. I don't want to just have them as display. So if you need some words of inspiration, here you go. Our parts are never greater than the sum. Let that sink in. It's a lyric from one of my favorite songs. If I can remember, I will link that song down below. All right, let's take a look at this quilt. There it is. I'm not sure I'm going to get any farther on the stains, but as I was standing there, I look up and I see this little whisk broom. Now, this thing is about the size of my hand. I just stopped seeing it in my laundry room. Do you do that? Do you see something and then you're like, oh, I haven't seen that in so long, even though it was right in front of you? That's what happened. But before I got carried away, I thought, one last thing. I'm going to work this Castile soap into these stains before I start washing this quilt in the washer. I'm going to use cold water and a gentle cycle. You do not want to roughhouse this quilt at all. And most importantly, you do not want to put this quilt in the dryer. This quilt is pretty old and I don't want to have any more damage than I already have. But on a gentle cycle with some gentle soap, you see I'm also using a little laundry booster there, but a gentle soap and gentle cycle, in other words, the spin cycle. Oh, you see there I'm throwing in some vinegar too, just to get rid of the musty smell that it has. And I'm just going to wash it on a gentle cycle. I think I've said that 5 times. And that's it. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't know. Go easy on the spin. Don't use hot water. Use cold water. Cross your fingers and say a little prayer. Back to this little broom that has been staring at me for months and I completely forgot about it. Look, it goes perfectly with the larger whisk brooms. This is so cute. So I have a plan. That whole wall is going to be a whole bunch of whisk brooms and maybe even over top of the 2 sliding doors that I have there on the pantry. Let me know your thoughts on a little collection of whisk brooms and let me know if you have any whisk brooms for your own laundry room. The quilt is done and it looks pretty good. I'm holding my breath here, but it looks pretty good. Now, when you lift this out of your washer, it is going to be heavy. Oops, there's the stains. Oh, well, we did the best we could. Anyway, back to that. You want to be careful when you lift it out because the weight of that quilt could additionally tear any of the weak spots. So this happened to be a day that I did my sheets and my bed wasn't completely made yet. So what I did, because that storm was going on outside, you can even see in the windows how the trees are blowing. What I did with this quilt was I just laid it flat and I turned on my ceiling fan in the bedroom and I just allowed it to dry all day long. It took almost the whole day. I don't think I made my bed until pretty late that night. That's a really good way to dry out a quilt like this. You could hang it on the clothesline, but if you do, make sure that it's not out in the sunshine. So that little made in France Ironstone pitcher is going to go right up on our mantle along with all my other little pitchers and sugar bowls. They look so good against the dark surfaces around those sugar bowls and the pitchers. There it is in the middle. Isn't it so cute? It's perfect. It's like it's finally found its people. And there it is on my mantle. So cute. The basket is dry too. I had put 2 coats of bleach on that basket. So in between, I didn't show you the second time I put bleach on. And it took a little while for it to dry because it was pretty humid outside. And even though it was in the garage, it was humid. So it took a good 2 days to completely dry. This is going to be perfect to hold all the books that I plan on reading as I'm falling asleep at night. But honestly, I wind up watching YouTube videos right before I go to bed. I know that's not a good habit. Reading would be better, so maybe this will encourage me to pick up a book instead of opening up YouTube to watch a video. Hey, by the way, are you interested in me making over this little footstool? Let me know your suggestions for making it over. Should I reupholster? Should I paint it? Tell me what I should do down in the comments. And here is this beautiful quilt. Oh my goodness, this was such a pretty find. Even with those stains that you see there, and with them being dry, they did lighten up quite a bit. I'm impressed with that. I'm okay with that because those stains were old, and that's hard to get out of a quilt, old stains, because they have just set, like they have just set. Anyway, this quilt is going to be cared for very carefully. Now, our dog sleeps in the bed with us, so I will not be using this on our bed because I don't want my dog to lay on it, because then I would have to wash it often. And my goal is to not wash this too often. I've already got enough damage on this thing. I don't want to make it worse. So I do want to be careful with it. But at the same time, I believe that the quilter that used it intended it to be used. I'm sorry, the quilter that made it intended it to be used. So I plan on using this quilt carefully, but I plan on using this quilt. As I worked on this quilt, I thought about the woman, probably a woman, who made this quilt originally. She might have taken scraps of clothing that they were no longer using, like that chambray could have been shirts that her husband used for work, or some of those pinstripes could have been other shirts that were used. Those calicos are very reminiscent of the 1930s, especially that purple print. That is definitely 1930s fabric. I just imagine someone using the supplies that she had on hand to make this quilt. Oh my goodness, I want to tear up thinking about it. But she made this quilt for her family to stay warm. That just touches a special place in my heart. So like I said, I'm not going to be using this quilt on our bed, but I did want to show you a little peek of a project that's coming. That's that wall that I've been trying to get to for months now. Stay tuned because I do have a great project in the works for that wall in our bedroom. That blue vintage jar looks so pretty sitting on our kitchen island filled with the zinnias. Oh, I love it. And I put that jar on a stack of white plates just to bring another layer of interest to it. And do you see those pumpkins there in the background? We're getting ready to make those. So let me grab the supplies and I'll show you how to make those adorable pumpkins. Here are the supplies that you need. You need a napkin. You need some stuffing, jute twine. You need heavy wire. More on that here in a little bit. You need a Ziploc bag, some poly pellets, or you could use rice. And you need some zip ties and let's see, some scrap fabric for leaves. So I put a little bit of the poly pellets in a Ziploc bag because of course I'm going to reuse these once I'm done with the season. And I'm also using some new polyfill as well as some polyfill from an old pillow. I do this all the time. I'm constantly reusing things. So you just gather up the four corners, decide if that's big enough or not. I had to add a little bit more and put the poly pellets in a little bag like that, or the rice on the bottom, and it'll give the pumpkin a nice weight. So anyway, you gather all that up, and then once you have it all gathered up, like bring in all the edges under your hand the best that you can, you're going to use a zip tie to hold it. Now I put that zip tie on, and then as I went around and pulled up more of the edges of the napkin, I tightened up the zip tie even more. So don't pull that zip tie completely tight right out of the gate. You want to give yourself some working room. This is just acting as another hand. And then you'll see that I pull more of that napkin, the edges out. And be careful that you don't tear your napkin. I plan on using these napkins once the fall season is over. By the way, this would be a great project for napkins that you find when you're out at the thrift store. There are all sorts of napkins, colorful, solid ones, printed ones. You can get them so cheap at a thrift store. Now, these are just ones that I have on hand. These are cloth napkins that we use every day. I don't use paper napkins at our house. I never have. And I just have a whole boatload of cloth napkins. I really love them. But anyway, you just kind of fluff it out up at the top, and then you take this really heavy wire. I found this at my local Walmart. I will link it down below. I folded it in half, and then I just kind of stuffed it into the center of that, the opening there. And you're going to have to fool with this, like keep pulling and tugging and tightening that zip tie as you go along. You'll see how tight it needs to be. You see there, I tightened it again. Then you take 2 of the corners and you bring them into that wire, leaving 2 of the corners extending out. They're kind of like wings off to the side. And we are going to make the stem out of this. Now I'm going to go get my heavy duty cutters and cut that zip tie so that I don't have all that excess hanging out there. Once I know that it's completely tight enough, I clipped off that excess just fine. Don't get the fabric. You don't want to cut that napkin. Anyway, then you take that fabric that you've got around that heavy wire and you take some jute twine and you tie it on first. Like I tied it underneath all that gathering, right where the zip tie is. I tied it in a knot first. And then I took that long end of the jute twine and I wrapped it around the wire and the fabric. What this does is it makes it kind of thick and bulky. And by the time you wrap this whole thing up with the jute twine, or most of it up, you have a nice, heavy, thick stem. And the great thing is that when you're done the season, you'll be able to just unwind all this and have all the parts and pieces for another project in the future. I wrapped the jute twine all the way up to cover the napkin completely, but I didn't go all the way to the top. I guess you could. And then I slowly wrapped back down and I tied the 2 ends together from, the very beginning when I tied that initial knot. Then I took the stem and I kind of bent it to make it look kind of cattywampus, like a little pumpkin stem, and just kind of made it look a little bit whimsical. So cute. I grabbed some scrap fabric that I have some burlap, and I have a pale green, and I just roughly cut out the shape of a leaf. Now don't get freaked out about this. It's just 2 parentheses put together. That's all that is, with a little section on the end. I took it over to my faucet and I got it nice and wet so that it would not be stiff. That burlap, by the way, was used to upholster a settee. I'll link that blog post down below and you'll see how gorgeous it is on the settee, and I have a lot of it left over. So I just cut it and then I just shoved that into the center part where that big heavy wire goes, and there you have it. We have a little leaf and a cute little pumpkin. Can't you just see these in all sorts of colors and patterns? I made 3 of them for our kitchen island. I really love how they look. This is just such a cute look. My husband came home from work this day and he said, "Oh, those are the cutest pumpkins." So he loved them too. By the way, he hand carved that dough bowl that you see there. That is a bowl that we've had for, I think, about 15 or 20 years, long time. And little secret, we eat salad out of that dough bowl all the time. I'll make a great big salad and I'll put the salad in that bowl. He gets a fork and I get a fork and we just eat from one end to the next towards the center, and we call it a day. That's our dinner. But anyway, there are our little pumpkins. There's your bonus project. Aren't they so cute? I could make a dozen of these and have them all over. Let me know if you decide to make any of these pumpkins, and I would just love to see it. If you do, tag me over on Instagram with a picture of your pumpkin so I can see how yours turned out. I hope you enjoyed the projects. If you did, go ahead and let me know your favorite project throughout. I would love to hear from you. Click the thumbs up button just below the video so that others who enjoy makeovers just like you do can find this video. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.